holding managerial positions in the sector. And as you all know, he's a Thomian. He holds a doctorate in business management from Malaysia and a master's degree in business administration from the University of Western Sydney, Australia, a certified professional marketer from the Asia Pacific Marketing Federation, and holds a postgraduate diploma in marketing from the Sri Lanka Institute of Marketing. Has a membership in long list of professional bodies and federations. With that, I just want to justify one reason why we have selected Doctor for this discussion is Dr. Pires was appointed by the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce as the lead to formulate the 2025 health sector strategy in contributing to the Sri Lankan economic acceleration. At the same time, with this pandemic situation, he was also the lead in crafting the post-COVID recovery plan for hospitals. So with that introduction, I will pose the first question to you, Doctor. As laymen, we really don't know how this hospital or the healthcare sector operates. So as we know, the healthcare industry is a complex and an important industry to keep Sri Lanka and our people healthy. We would like you to request to share some insight to the Sri Lankan healthcare industry, mainly focusing on the hospital sector. Over to you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Doctor, and a very good evening to all the participants and all the speakers. So to answer your question, over the past decades, the Sri Lankan healthcare system has achieved much better health indicators and coverage when compared with the neighboring countries at a lower cost and higher standards. Now, although Sri Lanka has notable achievements in terms of controlling communicable diseases, continued efforts are needed to control commonly occurring epidemics such as dengue, influenza, and to prevent the insurgence or resurgence of already controlled contagious diseases. It is noteworthy to understand that Sri Lanka was also declared as a measles-free country by the WHO in July 2019. A recurrence of dengue and influenza epidemics were observed during the first half of 2019, and the dengue prevalence was 120 per 1,000 persons during the first half of last year. So with the changes in disease patterns and the rising income levels, households were increasingly relying on private healthcare services, particularly in a backdrop of a tight fiscal space that limits government expenditure on healthcare sector. Now, this was pre-COVID. So therefore, we predicted before the pandemic that the government will be strengthening the regulations on private healthcare providers to ensure quality and affordability of services. Another significant area is CKD, or better known as chronic kidney disease, continue to be a major health issue, particularly in rural areas. We also saw opportunities in public-private partnership to provide access to quality, affordable healthcare to masses and to reduce the burden of the public healthcare system. So let me give you a glimpse of some key public healthcare statistics we have. For example, if you look at the government sector or the public sector, we have over 21,000 doctors. So that's about 1 doctor per 1,100 patients in Sri Lanka. There are 613 government hospitals with 768,000 beds, which is 3.2 beds per 1,000 persons. We have 36,700 nurses, again 1 nurse for 648 persons. We have 114 government Ayurvedic hospitals with a bed capacity of about 4,900 and 25,000 registered Ayurvedic physicians in the country. So these are some of the public statistics for the benefit of the audience. Now, if you take a closer look at the private healthcare statistics, we have about 200 odd private hospitals with a bed capacity of over 5,000 beds. There are 265 medical labs, 129 medical centers and channeling centers in the country, and about 330 part-time general practices or dispensaries or medical clinics. And once again, if we look at the pre-pandemic or the pre-COVID era, during the first half of 2019-20, the hospital industry indicated about a 5% overall growth when compared with last year, which is a very small growth. The low growth was due to the 1% growth recorded in Q1 and Q2. But however, the hospital industry was able to, improve thereafter during the balance 2 quarters. The low growth was mainly due to the Easter aftermath of the Easter bombing. Now, let me also highlight some of the interesting facts for the benefit of the audience here. The elderly population of 2.4 million in 2001 increased to about 3.8 million in 2018, that is representing 17% of the country's total population. Now, by 2041, it is predicted that 25% of the population is expected to be elderly. Now, this bears an increasing demand for the specialized healthcare needs for the elderly. Then again, rising incidence of non-communicable diseases, better known as NCDs, such as diabetes, cardiac, cancer, and chronic respiratory diseases are on the rise and accounting for nearly 75% of hospital deaths in this country. So NCDs have thus emerged as a serious economic and public health issue and is further aggravated by unhealthy diets, sedentary lifestyles, and the use of tobacco and alcohol. Another area in the hospitals or the healthcare industry that we need to focus is medical and wellness tourism, which is seen as a worthwhile investment, especially due to the strengths of our country to be transformed as an emerging healthcare hub in the region. And another interesting fact in the healthcare industry is that non-healthcare businesses are eyeing to enter the healthcare sector through digital healthcare solutions, especially tech companies. So therefore, the traditional and rigid hospital operating models should relook at their offer to make sure that they create an entire ecosystem around their core clinical activities. The healthcare industry is also grappling with shortage of skilled professionals, including doctors, specialists, qualified pharmacists, nurses, then technical staff. We also see a rise in medical insurance penetration in future in this country. And with free universal healthcare embedded into our constitution of Sri Lanka, healthcare system is widely recognized in the world as a country providing high quality clinical services and accessibility to healthcare. So in Sri Lanka, we need to understand our market is a mixed market dominated by the public health services. Now, the private health sector makes a significant impact on the country's healthcare. This sector is a conduit. I would define it as a conduit for introducing innovations in healthcare to the country, ensuring Sri Lankans have access to high quality diagnostic treatments necessary to facilitate healthy living. Continuous focus on high standards and process efficiencies has driven the private healthcare sector to be on par with regional players at a fraction of the cost of healthcare in the Western world. So during last year, all private hospitals recorded a weaker EBITDA margin compared to the previous years. Like I said, especially due to the slowdown in the revenue compared to our operating costs and the economic slowdown affected by the 21st April Easter attack. However, due to the agility and the flexibility of the industry, the sector recorded a noteworthy growth. So this is a synopsis about the healthcare industry, and I hope I have given a fairly good insight to the hospital industry.
Another specific area, Doctor, I had to slightly change my question by looking at the questions that I've received from our viewers. I think there are a few interested parties who are trying to write this as a success story in Sri Lankan context. And the question that I have for you, Doctor, is hospitals were identified as a very risky places during this pandemic, no wonder. And you all were identified as essential service as well. And how did these hospitals and the industry as a whole took this challenge of safeguarding your employees, the healthcare workers, and the patients? When we see, I mean, you look at the thing that we heard in other countries, especially like in China, the doctor in charge of the hospital couldn't save his life. That was the situation in China. So I want you to comment on that, sir.
Okay. So during the pandemic, as healthcare workers, rightly like you said, our prime concern was to protect and safeguard the doctors, caregivers, healthcare workers, our own staff, patients, the community, and everyone who walks through hospital doors in order to provide safe, top quality healthcare services for those seeking medical assistance. So therefore, we had to take very stringent measures to mitigate all risks as much as possible. Now, in doing so, we had to put together an action, well thought out protocols, also shared by the Ministry of Health, the Epidemiology Unit, the WHO, and further strengthened by experts in the field of infectious diseases. Now, both government and private healthcare institutions had to put in place a robust governance structure comprising of steering committees that assesses the country's situation and new developments on a daily basis, engaging with all stakeholders such as the National Operations Center for Prevention for COVID-19 outbreak, like I told you, the Epidemiology Unit, the MOH, and also the Private Hospitals Association, etc. Now, during the pandemic and the lockdown, the hospital revenues were down by 70%. Doctors did not want to see patients due to the risk of exposure. And the patients did not want to risk themselves by walking into hospitals due to the risk of exposure again. Then we also saw that elective surgeries were indefinitely postponed due to the risk to the patients and also to the healthcare workers. And also at that time, during the initial pandemic, due to the lack of PCR testing facilities in the country. However, the hospitals were quick to change their business model to provide services through digital platforms and via doorstep services such as teleconsultations, telemedicine, home care, home medical care, home sample collections for diagnostics, etc. Now, stringent processes and protocols were implemented by hospitals to safeguard patients, visitors, staff from the coronavirus infection, and still, I want to reiterate, and still continues to be a part of a safety-centric operating model. Why I wanted to reiterate this word was that people now think that everything is okay and that they can do anything what they want, which is not the real fact. So whatever that I'm telling you right now it still continues to be a part of that safety mechanism. So let me highlight some of the key precautionary measures we put in place for the hospitals to continue to provide 24/7 healthcare services to people of Sri Lanka. Whilst the public hospitals were mobilized to handle COVID patients, the private hospitals provided access to routine healthcare needs. And some of the precautionary measures that we took were, number one, we introduced a patient declaration form to be filled by the patient on arrival. And then screening of patients to be carried out outside the main entrance of the hospital, and facilities were constructed for this purpose by hospitals. Then all patients were triaged. Those days patients used to just walk into a hospital. But then we started triaging all the patients, and according to the responses given in the self-declaration, were categorized into a risk matrix. So the COVID suspected patients are kept separately until the patient is transferred to a designated government hospital. Now, once again, I must tell you that private hospitals were not allowed to treat COVID patients, and the government designated 17 hospitals as COVID treating hospitals. So these are the hospitals that I mentioned. Then PPE, PPE is personal protective equipment, will be worn by the staff when transferring these patients. Transfer protocols have been established in our hospitals. High-risk category is kept in observation areas under CCTV surveillance, maintaining social distancing until a doctor with relevant PPE examines them in a separate examination chamber. Now, according to the clinical decision, medical and surgical patients who needs to be ruled out of COVID infection will be transferred to an observation ward inside the hospital through a secured pathway for COVID PCR testing. If the test result is negative, the patient will be sent to a normal ward of the hospital, and if positive, will, like I told you before, will be transferred to a designated government hospital. Then observation wards inside hospitals have been separated and restructured according to infection control and engineering guidelines. Separate protocols are developed for different clinical scenarios. For example, PPE use, disinfection and disposing infected material to prevent cross-infection amongst healthcare workers and the patients. Also specified locations were made available to provide ICU care for patients in line with infection control guidelines. And also hospitals such as HEMAS introduced online digital solutions to fill self-declaration forms on patients' smartphones before arriving at the hospital. So this safeguards the patients, or rather the staff, from exposure to COVID virus, and also we were able to assess the risk and the condition of the patient even before they present themselves to the hospital. Then hand washing facilities before entering to the hospital is provided just outside the entrance along with the hand sanitizers. Further tents, marquees and facilities were put up for the bystanders to stay because we had to reduce overcrowding within the hospital. We couldn't allow everybody to come into the hospital because sometimes we see that with one patient, you get about 5-6 relatives walking into the hospital. So in order to safeguard the community and everyone, we had to lay some laws and restrictions for the benefit of healthcare workers and the patients themselves. Then resuscitation and nebulization areas were fitted by air vents with HEPA filters so that air within would not contaminate the rest of the hospital. Then uniflow systems for patients and visitors. The staff had been established where they enter through a main entrance and exit through another exit back door. Protocols for sample collection was established with recommended PPE and transport media. What else? Then processes to follow in relevant, so in the event an employee is infected or exposed to the virus with possible infection was established. proper donning and doffing of PPE has been demonstrated to the staff and pictorial instructions displayed. Then staff has been instructed on home quarantine if a need arises, such as those with possible exposure. Then we also introduced home care visits, and also these home care visits were undertaken after establishing risk category based on the self-declaration, which is filled at the time of booking these services. Protocols were laid down for the hospital cleaning staff on proper surface and area cleaning of the hospitals. Until very recently, all patients undergoing general anesthesia for surgery were subjected to PCR testing. We don't do that because now the risk of COVID in the community is less. Then ultraviolet, we call them UVC, disinfection equipment is used to disinfect operating theaters, patient rooms, etc. Then another very interesting thing that the hospital started was batch rostering of staff. So what I mean is that we are a 24/7 operation. So if I get exposed, I cannot infect everyone in the hospital and for the hospital to close down. Hospitals never close down. So what we did was 50% of the staff were on paid leave for 14 days. The other 50% worked 12-hour shifts. And at the end of 14 days, the current batch is replaced by the employees who were on paid leave. And this was carried out, like I said, to minimize staff exposure to infection. Then internal audits still is carried on to monitor adherence to all the protocols and the processes. So these are some of the stringent protocols followed by hospitals, HEMAs, as well as most of the other hospitals. Now, there were also huge cost increases due to very high consumption of PPE during this time. Personal protective equipment, the consumption was, fivefolds, it increased by fivefolds. Hand sanitizers and disinfections, there were added costs to facilitate employees to work from home in terms of ICT costs. Hospitals had to incur huge costs to create safe environments for employees and also to keep patients and the community safe. Employees had to be provided with free meals because they were staying within the hospital, in the hospital, because we couldn't release them to the community because of the risk of exposure to the community. Free transportation, pay them special risk allowances for the sheer commitment shown by staff during the pandemic. Had to focus a lot on staff welfare. For example, if I take the hospital that I work for as an example, we did not take the route of salary cuts for our employees. We also made sure that the staff were paid a part of the bonus. So these were some of the precautionary measures that we took, and also some of the very important welfare measures that we took, because rightly, like you said, we are in the front line. We carry the highest risk of exposure. So therefore, even though the businesses had to suffer a lot, like I said, the revenue declined by 70%, but still we had to focus on staff welfare to make sure that we provide our staff who have so much of commitment to protect our own country. So these were some of the precautionary measures that we took, very stringent protocols that we still adhere to. I hope I did justice to the question.
Yes, thank you very much. The question is the pandemic over?
No, the pandemic is over, but we are still in the COVID era. We are not in the post-COVID era. So everyone has to keep that in mind.
Okay, next question, Doctor. I've collected from the question that got from viewers as well. This is about your, like, now we talk of this new normal, and what strategies are in place to actually gain quick recovery of the industry. That is one. And I want you to touch base on the present situation and the way forward as far as the general public is concerned. That's us. How long we have to be like this under this precautionary methods. Your thoughts on that, sir?
Okay. So during the pandemic and the post-pandemic in Sri Lanka, I think consumer lifestyles, buying behavior, usage habits have all undergone significant change. Consumers, I think, across the globe have signaled a significant change in the usual consumption habits and health-seeking behavior, which may, I again reiterate, which may prevail in the post-COVID era. So these new behavioral trends are predicted to stay on, like I said, even after the world moves beyond the impact of COVID-19. So these changes will surely make a significant impact on our businesses, our family units, the consumer lifestyles, etc. Now, due to the uncertainty of the lack of knowledge of the new normal, every sector will have to carry out extensive research to understand as to what businesses should do during the post-COVID recovery and what it should do to take advantage of the new normal. So I have personally seen significant change in consumer behavior during the last 2 months when compared to the pre-COVID era. And what's interesting is that the behavior keeps changing at a rapid pace. Now, during the lockdown, we saw a huge demand for digital online services such as teleconsultations, telemedicine, then on the online pharmacy delivery, and also for home services such as home medical care, home sample collections for diagnostics, etc. Now, however, when the curfew was lifted and the spread of COVID became less threatening and transportation became normal, that high demand for digital and home services gradually declined. However, we now see a significant number of consumers still using these new services, and this change in consumer behavior we are witnessing as of now is probably the new normal. Now, you and I actually did not expect a lifestyle or a livelihood or economic disruption of this magnitude as a result of a health crisis. Same way, businesses were also not prepared for this. The BCPs, we call the business continuity processes, were not stress tested enough, and most corporates were dependent on the leadership and the agility of its management in facing the crisis. So most corporates act swiftly to cut down costs by way of salary cuts, then better control on manpower and administration costs, process re-engineering, while the SMEs, the small medium enterprises, which is we call the lifeblood of the economy, was at risk of closure. Now, the result of all this is a much smaller wallet of the consumer with less disposable income, where the consumer is now forced to make tough choices due to less earnings. So the businesses now have to compete on a shrunk wallet of the consumer. And it is also assumed that the Sri Lankan consumer intends to continue their price cautious behavior even after the crisis. So the companies will have to face a challenging task in redefining their value proposition of their brands to a more price sensitive market. And I was actually going through an interesting piece of research on Sri Lankan consumer habits after post-COVID-19. I think it's very good for Chandana as well to understand the consumer habits of the pre-COVID era. And according to this paper, it said about 66% consumers will spend less on branded clothing, and another 66% will cut down on foreign travel. Then there is, if I remember right, 40% of the consumers will cut expenses on beauty products, and about 59% will reduce eating out at restaurants because they were so used to eating at home during the lockdown. And 34% of consumers will cut back on local leisure activities, and 39% will reduce their expenses on home electronics. I think this is extremely scary for the businesses. So we predict that the healthcare industry after COVID and the health-seeking behavior of people will also change. Now, for example, what I assume as the new normal is that, better hand washing habits and personal hygiene will become normal. Air quality and self-protection from germs will become big, right? People will want to be sure of medicine availability. You saw how our parents, my dad, right, had to really was very, very nervous about whether he will be able to buy his medicines. Unfortunately, his son was working in a hospital, but I mean that was the mindset, right? Older people may be scared to live by themselves again, so old age homes will become popular. People will want to consume more knowledge about health and infections. I believe that online purchases of medicines and essentials will be very, very popular post-COVID. People will not want to go to public places where there are large crowds. I hope that it happens. Demand for supplements and alternative medicine to boost immunity will become very popular. We have seen lots of video posts about, how these organic things that is grown in Sri Lanka boost the immune system. Then the old and the sick people will be quite reluctant to enter a hospital and would prefer to go to less crowded, smaller clinics to consult a doctor. I also believe that telemedicine will become more popular. Shops will need to focus on healthy air and will not spread the germs. Chandana can educate us whether AC systems will need to have HEPA filters in future. Will people look for that?
Quick question, Doctor. Again, I'm getting some questions from our viewers. They are just asking me to check with you. How safe people to go for local tours these days? Very simple question.
Okay.
I think hotels are offering different packages. Chandana, you can comment next time when you get an opportunity. Doctor.
So I think number one we need to understand is that Sri Lanka has been very, very efficient in managing the pandemic and COVID-19. The leadership that was given by the president, the COVID task force, the healthcare workers, I think did an enormous, marvelous job, the armed forces, in controlling the pandemic. So what I have to tell you is that the threat of COVID being in the community is very less as of now.
Okay.
So there is no community spread as of now of COVID-19 because all those clusters were managed very efficiently. But the risk is still there, right? So therefore, you can go on trips, or you can visit Chandana's hotel for a weekend package, but you need to make sure that your basics are adhered to. Hand washing, wearing mask, social distancing or physical distancing as we may call it, right? Making sure that you don't touch your face, your eyes, your mouth, your nose, right? As long as you take precautionary measures, I believe life can be normal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lakhvit Peiris. Thank you very much for